So I'm going to speak a little bit about direct experience and a practice that I came up with called real-time um, noticing. Now, some of you may have heard of real-time looking, and it's interesting because somebody developed that around the same time that I was kind of playing with this real-time noticing, and so they're actually different. Real-time looking is there's actually a group that's on the Killaby website or Killaby Facebook page, and it involves some steps of how to look at one's experience or be with one's experience. And I love that practice, and I'd highly recommend it. It's a kind of a group work, but this is a little bit different. This is for me just more simple. It may not be as deep, depending on the person, but it's a way for me. I would say it's a way to connect with some self-inquiry in a simple way. And I find that self-inquiry isn't always easy for people. I mean, I'm including myself in that, and I'm also including people that I train to be facilitators. It takes the people that I'm training to be facilitators, it takes them a while to learn how to self-facilitate, and they're pretty immersed in this work. So I'm always trying to find what's the simplest, easiest way, so to speak, to connect with one's experience, to do some getting to know yourself, so to speak, getting to know what's here now, what's happening now, to inquire into the present moment experience, which is what a self-inquiry really is. So I call it real-time noticing, and it's simply that. My phraseology is going to be repetitive here because it's all getting at the same thing. It's really stopping to say, what's happening now? And that's what direct experience is. It's so simple that we have a difficult time with it because our brains are very complex and our minds tend to complexify everything. I'm not sure if complexify is a word, but it seems like it could be. It makes things very complicated, even the most simplest. So when we stop referencing the figuring out part of the mind and don't try to analyze or understand or really get it, and let that go for a minute, we can come into more of the right brain of what's happening now, here and now. And first I just want to reiterate that taking care of the nervous system is really important. So if your nervous system is ramped up, you can still do this. You can still ask the question, what's happening now? And that can very well help the nervous system relax. If you try to ask that question and you find that your nervous system is a little bit too agitated and maybe perhaps the hamster wheel or the mental spinning out is really happening, it might behoove you to honor that nervous system first before you ask this question. Again, do what is useful for your nervous system. Take a bath, take a shower, feel that maybe a cold compress on your face or behind your neck, or take a breath of fresh air. I have a lot of blog posts that talk about the nervous system, and there's lots of ways to tend to the nervous system. So just kindness and compassion is noticing or knowing yourself to the extent that you know that your nervous system is ramped up and you need to attend to that first. And that's very kind and compassionate to do so. And then when it feels like there's an ability to ask these questions, then ask them. And the invitation is to ask them from curiosity. I just want to say that an eagle just flew by my window, and I have to honor that for a moment because I've never seen an eagle fly past my window, and I'm really excited. Like, I feel it inside of me, and I also feel trying to contain it. But I wanted to really speak of it because I really love eagles, and I don't get to see them very often. And I was like, okay, Lisa, don't do that. Like, stay here. But so anyway, I just saw an eagle fly by, and I just feel the real excitement, and I want to share that with you. So that's my real-time noticing. my direct experience of that. Like I can really feel it in my body, and I'm excited, and I'm really excited I shared it with you. So I feel really grateful for that. Real-time noticing, yeah, is to simply notice what's happening here and now in direct experience. Part of what is happening here and now in direct experience is mentaling, is the mental thoughts. And in this exercise, so to speak, it's to just notice that as opposed to going into the mental thoughts. So it's not trying to figure out the thoughts, it's not trying to dissect the thoughts, it's not trying to separate out the thoughts or the imagery. It's to simply notice, oh, there's thoughts happening, there's images happening in my direct experience. And to be aware of that and to come into the experience of that happening. So for example, if I'm noticing that hamster wheel, that mental figuring out happening, there is a visceral signature for me. There is an energetic signature that I feel in direct experience. And it's not going to feel the same every time, but in general there might be like a little, like an unsettledness or a franticness. That word might be a little bit more apt here. And it gives me a clue. It's like, oh, there's a franticness here. That's my direct experience. What's here? What else is here? What's happening now? What am I noticing? I don't ask those questions that quickly, but I pause with them. So I might feel a franticness. Maybe it's showing up, as an energetic sensation. Maybe it's the other day I noticed it. I noticed my solar plexus kind of grasping. I was like, wow, my solar plexus is grasping, it's tightening. I'm noticing kind of an unease. And I didn't have the word franticness, but it was, I think I just used the word an anxiousness. There's an anxiousness here. I had a friend coming over and I let my friend know, like, this is what's happening in my experience. So that to me felt very kind, felt very compassionate to not only acknowledge it and recognize it in myself, but to express it to the person that was coming over. That person was able to be very kind in response. He was like, oh, yeah. And he said, is there any content with, like, what's it about? I'm like, yeah, I don't really have any content about it. I can make up some stories, but this is just kind of what's happening. And he was like, oh, and he was just really, just present with me, and it felt really kind and compassionate. So, coming back to this, what's happening now? Okay, so if I have this sensation, this grabbing in the solar plexus, for example, the invitation is to connect into that. What's happening now with that grabbing? Oh, I might notice an image of this, maybe a fist. Oh, there's an image that comes up. Okay, so what's underneath the sense of the image? There's a pushing, there's a pulling, there's a tightening. Okay. And at this point, there isn't a right and wrong. There isn't direction. There isn't a rule book on how to meet this stuff. When you're being facilitated or you feel like you have the tools to meet that, you can really get curious about the components or the expressions of that grasping. You can really slow down and say, well, it feels kind of like a tightening. And then the question might be, okay, is it okay to just let that tightening tighten? Noticing a tightening, can I just let that be? Or do I have to change it? Do I have to fix it? Do I have to analyze it? The answer might be yes to any of those questions. Again, the kindness and compassion just comes from being with the direct experience, and being with what is true for you now in this moment. It might be true and real for you in this moment that you need to understand it, and so maybe you do that in your own way. Maybe you journal about it, maybe you theorize about it. That's okay. We have mental abilities. You can reference them or use them. It might be doing something different. Again, that might be kind and compassionate to engage in a different activity. Or it might be just to rest with that tightening and not try to understand it, not try to let it be even. Like, oh yeah, there's a tightening in my solar plexus. That's what I'm noticing in direct experience. We can zoom in and zoom out. So the zooming in is to notice the unique or specific to this moment's expression, the characteristics. We can also kind of zoom out to notice, well, there's a tightening in my solar plexus, and there's also a coolness that I feel in my hands. And I also have the direct experience of sound. And I also notice a moistness in my mouth. And I also notice a pulsation that's happening in my, in my belly. Or I might, I'm just kind of doing that real time noticing right now is, yeah, my finger, there's a coolness in my fingers, and there's a moistness in my mouth, and there's a tingling sensation in my toes, and there's visuals in my mind, in my eyes, with my eyes open. And those are, it does have content, there's content involved. It's not contentless. I'm referencing, when I would say tingling in my toes, I'm referencing toes. I have an image of that come up. It's fine to notice content, and it's not content free necessarily. Direct experience is just whatever it is in your moment. And then you can pause with any of that noticing to notice, okay, so can I come to the tingling in my toes without the imagery? What's that like? And just to play there. You can do this a lot with breathing. With breath is always happening here and now. We often have a lot of ideas about the breath, but sometimes we can just be with the sheer movement, the sheer expression of the in to out movement, the direct experience of that inhalation and the exhalation. And we can also come into this more specifics, as we did in that earlier rest. There was neither's right, neither's wrong. There's lots of opportunity here to explore in direct experience, and to explore what's happening now. Because there is a lot happening now, in real time. In real time. What we tend to do is we think about what's happening in real time, or we go out of, quote unquote, go out of real time to think about what's happening. And that's fine too. We have that capacity. And we also have the capacity to be aware, oh, I'm thinking about that, as opposed to feeling from it or to being with it. So it's there's a vast playground here, and it's really just to play with the capacities that we have of exploration.